welcome my guest today, Dr. Gary Rosas, MD, who's been a friend of mine. We've been friends now for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually met at a place called Exercise Coach Working Out, which maybe we'll touch on a little bit today. Gary and I have met a few times. Super interesting guy. I'm super excited to have you on the show today. I'm just going to read a little bio of Gary, which is Dr. Gary Rosas. Am I saying your last name right?
Correct. Yep.
I have to say that to every single guest I have on because I butcher people's name.
Yeah.
Is a medical doctor. He is currently practicing emergency room physician here in Scottsdale, Arizona. He has an MBA in healthcare leadership. He's a board certified in family medicine, fellowship in Geriatrics. He's been the past medical director of Mercy Hospice and multiple nursing homes. Most recently completed the Human Potential Institute coaching program and is launching and has launched the Balanced Life Health and Wellness, which we're going to talk about some today. And then he has, which is a health and wellness company. I love your guys' tagline, which is Journey to Strive Balance. And I think we're going to be talking about creating a balanced life today for certain.
Yep.
I also know Gary is a family man. He's got a wife, 2 children. And he's soon to be opening the Balanced Life Studio, a human optimization center. So I want to talk about that and what that's going to be, because I just heard about this, so it sounds like something that's going to be another really cool venture that you're doing. And recently opened the Balanced Life and Phat Rides USA, which is an electric bike shop in Scottsdale. How's that going?
It's been exciting. That kind of fell into our lap with everything that's been happening, on the medical side. So,
so I think the first thing we want to touch on, and I want to just put this in context because this is a podcast, and sometimes people see podcasts a year later or 2 years after they've been originally released. And we are today, it's April 3rd, 2020.
Yes.
Which means we are right in the middle of a pandemic, COVID-19. And one of the first things, just with timing, that I wanted to talk to you about, because I know this is changing every day, but COVID-19 and your emergency room physician, what are you seeing first off right now? And just kind of what are some of your thoughts of what's going to be happening in the next couple of months? Because people who are watching this in more or less real time, man, there's just a lot of fear and anxiety going out in the world right now about all this. And I think most of the fear, a lot of the fear, I know my concern is really the healthcare system, our amazing healthcare providers, and kind of what's going to be happening in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here, Steve. Glad to connect again. But, in the midst of everything that's going on with COVID and kind of the what I like to say, kind of the view from the front lines, is right now we're still, we're in the Phoenix area, we're still in the calm before the storm. Okay. If those that are able to watch this kind of more in live time, we know that one of the epic centers, even in the world now, is New York City and our populous areas. And unfortunately, COVID is going to disseminate through the United States. We can already see the data there, and there's scary models that are going out there. From my view, it's been really interesting. We've put like a lot of protocols in place, but a lot of the patient flow, kind of what happens when we get to work, has been a mix of that anxiety, kind of wondering, hey, what's going to happen? But being the emergency room, that's where we expect unexpected, and all we can do is prepare the best that we can. So we've been putting a lot of different protocols in place, which have been welcome, but still somewhat alarming. Like one is the personal protective equipment. Like we know like where we're at in our emergency room, how much we have, how we will need to ration those when that happens, how we deal with a potential COVID patient. And honestly, it goes day to day, even shift to shift, because things can be very fluid. Right now, overall, we're seeing a decline in overall visits. I think a lot of that is because there's some of that fear there, some of that sheltering in place, which is good. But it's cut out a lot of those kind of non-emergent visits. Also, being in Arizona, this is usually a high time for travel. They canceled spring training, so that got a lot of the people that would come out for spring training aren't in town anymore. So we've been seeing some potential COVID cases. Personally, myself, I haven't had anybody I've treated that has come back positive.
Okay.
I do have positive or pending tests still out there.
Okay.
And testing is one of those things that's also been a moving target.
Right.
You know, I don't know if people have caught up on that, and that depends also on the hospital system, depends on supplies. There's different protocols that are coming down from the CDC, and then each hospital system, and then even each emergency room has their specific protocol on how we test.
Yeah. So. It almost seems like, I mean, at this present time, is the lack of testing is almost one of the biggest problems. Only because it seems like, isn't that the problem of we really don't know how many people are affected?
Right.
We kind of don't know the denominator of people affected versus people who are getting sick, very sick, people who are dying.
Right.
And can you kind of explain like why that's a problem right now?
Yeah.
In terms of preparation from your guys' side of the...
Correct. Yeah, and that's like we're talking about the calm before the storm. It's like we don't know what we don't know. Ideally, if we could test everyone, even if they're asymptomatic or symptomatic, and the reason that being is because a lot of the healthy population can be healthy carriers, and they don't know that they could be spreading it. But because of the amount of test, availability of test, right now our protocol is we don't test you. Like we have people call, our phone is off the hooks in the ER, like, hey, can you guys testing? And we have the ability to test, but to get the results, we have to send them off. And so we only test if they're sick enough to be in the hospital at this point, as of April 3rd. Again, that may change as more tests come. There is some chatter that we may get the 2-hour test in our hospital system. Right. I know another local hospital system, Banner, the largest one in Phoenix, they've started to set up mobile testing sites that still need physician orders, but that definitely helps people versus crowding an emergency room if they may possibly have COVID or another communicable disease.
So I mean, there will be people who are watching this, and we might even just do some clips on this, for people in the Phoenix, like Scottsdale area where we're filming this. I mean, what would you recommend to them right now if they're concerned? Like, when should they come in?
Right.
What's kind of me as just a person, who has a family, and say my wife gets a fever or one of my kids gets a fever, what's the appropriate steps I should be taking right now?
No, this is great. So especially when we're talking about, I know you and family, you're very healthy. Right. And so most people that are healthy, even if they become symptomatic, they're going to have more mild symptoms. So most people can be able to be managed at home. And if the key right now, if you have any type of symptoms, really, really take the self-quarantine seriously. It's one of those things that, and even I have to kind of go through that whole thought process too, every shift or even every day to be like, gosh, do I feel warm? Like the other day I was working outside, I was like, started to sweat, and my wife saw me sweat. She's like, you're not running a fever, right? Because I have young kids at home, a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old. Luckily, COVID isn't as aggressive towards the younger versus the older, but it's scary times.
And it's interesting too, and maybe we'll touch on it after you finish, but it's interesting just coming home. I mean, I'm not treating patients now, except for people who are in very acute situations. But it was interesting coming home, and even my wife, I was managing my concerns, my staff's concerns, my patients' concerns, and then I'm coming home and managing my family, my wife's personal concerns. And how are you handling that?
No, I'm glad that you tipped off on that, because actually I go back to work for a stretch of 3 shifts in the ER starting Sunday. And as of 2 weeks ago, what I've started to do is I actually take my my camper to work with me, because I don't know if I'm going to be exposed kind of that shift where I know I don't want to have to go home. Before that, it was still very diligent, like, gosh, I need to take off everything, before I, either right in the garage or right where our laundry room is to not, not infect, loved ones and family. Yeah. And so it's a very fluid situation. Like I don't know, I just have to take it kind of each day, but at least, I just saw that even there's some local hotels that are offering free lodging for frontline or healthcare workers.
Such a good idea.
Which is great because
is your plan, or is it even a plan, like once, because there's going to come a time, pretty certain, right? Unless some type of crazy miracle happens. I mean, there's just going to start being, you guys are going to start getting flooded with cases, and you certainly are going to get exposed. Right. Is that your plan at that time then, to just not be going home?
Well, and this is where the data, it's a very fluid target, because of course I said this earlier, like we don't know what we don't know. People are still gathering data. A lot of it's anecdotal from, worldwide, or even, New York or the other hotspots, to figure out how long can COVID be, even if you're asymptomatic, how long can you still be infectious? And a lot of the data right now, we're just extrapolating from other viruses. COVID is similar to the influenza virus in particle size, but there's some differences we're finding out. So a lot of the data that we're extrapolating is from that, where it's usually, and this is the crazy thing, for healthcare workers, the CDC, it has changed almost daily on when we can go back.
Right.
And I think they're doing it from a public health standpoint because they know if they say, hey, 14 days, or we don't know how long you can actually can infect other people, we're gonna run out of healthcare frontline workers.
Right.
So the scary thing I saw last week is, just within 24 hours, if you're no longer running a fever, go ahead and go back. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right, And so it's one of those things that it's a scary time out there, especially when there is a scarcity of the personal protective equipment.
Right.
Part of me is a big, I know the human body, even the immune response is an amazing thing. Like I would love if there would be a test that we could actually test the IgG antibodies.
Right.
Because being an ER doc, I actually traveled earlier in March to St. Louis for a trauma course where people came in from all over the world. We worked in close quarters under mannequins. This was kind of pre the social distancing and a lot of the recommendations now where I may or may not have been exposed. Like I don't know. Then that's how it is every even season with the influenza strains. Right. We can only do what we can do and then just kind of take each day. So I don't, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, you've been practicing long enough. Do you guys, is this like anything you've ever seen before? There's been other pandemics since you've been practicing, but like the response to this I
would, definitely nothing like I've seen. There's been similarities, like different pandemics. There's been SARS or even swine flu or the annual influenza strains that run through, but nothing that is acutely affected our daily living as this has.
Is that a function of COVID itself and the way this disease is? Is it a function of the way the world's maybe even shifted in the last 5 or 10 years? Is it a function of both?
I think it's a mixture of all that. I would be amiss to say it's just one certain thing. I think it's a mix of just the current state of kind of where we're at.
Right.
There is we use the term novel when describing this virus because it is something new, novel, and we just saw it spread so quickly, and even
what's funny is that when I first heard novel, I thought it sounded like it was like casual to me.
Like a book.
I totally had like the wrong understanding of what
novel. Novel means unique or new. It's kind of one of those things. People threw that out there, especially in U.S. Our culture is crazy because people just want to make memes out of everything. Like, what do you mean a novel? Or even now when it was called Corona, it was like, well, I guess I'm going to drink Dos Equis. It's just the kind of the way now. It's like, gosh, this unfortunately, people are dying, and it's going to get more personal if it hasn't yet for people. Like you're going to know someone or a loved one or yourself that'll get symptomatic, and when that happens, it's no longer videos from across the world or from China or even now from New York City. Right. Those haunting pictures that we see that the city that never sleeps. Right. Looks like they're.
Yeah, I think there's. It's going to be an interesting journey this next month or two, and we'll have this video to look back on it, but it's going to be interesting. Where do you see things? Let's think about more now, and maybe this is our transition into some of the health and wellness stuff. Yeah. We will get past the worst of this, though.
Right. Humans are resilient.
Yes, and for certain, as bad as it's going to be, and we'll find out all like 2 or 3 months from now, the way these things play out, we'll be past the worst of it. Where do you see some? First of all, what do you think that might look like? Okay. But what in terms of a health and wellness person, because one of the things that you and I really connect on is health and wellness, and I think you're such an interesting guest to have on with what's going on right now because you are on both sides of you're on the side of, hey, you're still a practicing ER doctor, and this is a pretty extreme moment in time that we're having right now, and then the other side of it, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, you kind of transitioned into this world of really being like a life coach and all things that encompass in that. And a big part of that is health and wellness. Sure. So where do you see in terms of, since most of us are going to be okay, what are advice that you would give to, maybe some of your patients or some of the people that you coach with, which is 3 months from now, what are you doing now to get to where you want to be? And maybe if you knew about this circumstance where we're in right now 3 months ago, what are things that people could be doing really to like be healthy and wellness, and when things like this pop up, taking care of themselves.
Right, and I love this question because you're right. I am positioned in a unique space where I'll start with that first part, like where do I kind of see this, and I'll kind of comment then on the current situation. Like, I'm hoping the wave will, the way the projections look, the wave's going to come here in about 6 to 8 weeks locally, and just like. And I'm kind of going off even my own anecdotal data of like hoping, like this is usually when influenza starts to tail off, kind of when the weather starts to warm up.
Right.
There's been some data about showing that COVID, as the northern hemisphere warms up, it won't be as severe.
Right.
We'll kind of see how that all shakes out. To comment on like this intersection of this COVID pandemic and health and wellness is a lot of this, almost our day-to-day norm shutting down is making people look inward. And when people look inward, they can go a couple different ways. They can become either traumatized by that, or they can take that opportunity for almost like a soft reset, like when your phone has too many apps running. Like everything's running, and you can say, man, this thing is running slow. We're being forced to like start to look at all those apps that are running, be like, well, I don't have to do all that stuff anymore. A lot of the country now isn't going to the office like they used to, or isn't even going to the movies. They're not going to concerts, not going to shows, and so they're looking inward, and they're, a lot, I think that's actually, and this is maybe a bigger philosophical thing, but like Mother Nature, Mother Earth, like things happen for a reason, and humans are here where we'll kind of see where it all shakes out. But from the health and wellness side, people are becoming more acutely aware of like, crap, this is serious. What have I been doing to take care of myself? And what can I do to optimize my own immune system, my own health and vitality in the face of a pandemic? And that's where I think it's going to be really interesting, because it's kind of one of those things when you start to look at that mirror, you can start to see cracks, or people can start to look at these are opportunities for improvement. And people like me and you that kind of run around in that health and wellness community before all that, we're uniquely positioned to help people become that. That's why I love the term of, even human potential or human optimization. It's like, you can stay the way you want to, or you're given an opportunity like this to evolve or optimize yourself, which may be more of an issue of like a survival of the fittest. Unfortunately, during pandemics, it is a thinning of the herd, of a sense. And we're seeing that with especially the people with comorbidities like heart disease, diabetes, systemic issues. But unfortunately, there's even the healthy population. Like we've been hearing about docs from other countries, are now even here within the United States, that got exposed on the front lines. And that hits a lot closer to home. And this, when I mentioned earlier, like COVID being personal, when I went back to Missouri, that's where I trained. I spent a lot of time in the trenches in the ER with the ER team. And one of the ER docs, actually, I shook his hand and gave him a big hug because we worked together for over 5 years in the ER. I found out last week that he's COVID positive, and he's been on a ventilator for at least a week. And so it's like this, once I kind of checked back in with my family back, my work family back then, I was like, hey, how are you guys holding up? Just hearing that a colleague that, he's only 10 years older than me, not quite as healthy, but, he was still working full time in the ER. And like I said, it was one of those, I can still picture that moment, when I was back in that ER and just seeing, it's still crazy busy there too. And then just to know that that's going on. And so it's
Have you been tested at this point?
I have not. Fortunately, I haven't had a patient encounter that has come back with a positive test, and I haven't been symptomatic. And so it's one of those things I would love to be able to. It's one of those things like I wish I could just request, but that's not. Those are decisions that are made at a higher level, and we have so many tests and who gets tested, and it's crazy here in the United States because you hear about all the NBA stars are getting tested. I'm sure they don't adhere to all the CDC guidelines or Hollywood, and then you'll see them on social media touting it. It's like this crazy world that we live in that I'm almost glad there's a reset of it.
Yeah, it is an interesting time, and I love what you were saying. I think you're right. Is what's going on right now is certainly causing people to go inward. Everybody I talk to is just looking at things differently, and I think it's good or bad when you have like a situation that's challenging. You're going to come out of it one way or another. You're either going to come out of it as a victim, or you're going to come out of it empowered and better off. And it is such a pivotal moment, and I think a lot of people are looking to really like take control of their health and well-being. And you know, this show and you and I already were kind of already about health and longevity, and just optimizing yourself. And
Sure.
I think it's, you know, what will come good, there's always a silver lining to things, is what will come good is a lot more people are going to be empowered now.
Right.
And kind of tell me how you kind of got, you know, because I know you said like about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago is when this all started for you.
Yeah.
What was your pivotal moment? That's a pretty big shift and transition from being just this doctor, you know, and I think, and not knocking the healthcare profession at all, but it's kind of sad that too many people in the healthcare profession, when you look at them, aren't exactly the picture of what you would call health.
Correct.
So,
I'd love to comment.
What happened to you?
Yeah.
What's different about you?
Yeah. So I've and Steve, I didn't know you back then, but I was a few years ago. I've
seen pictures of you back
then.
Yeah.
So I had my own kind of journey through medicine, and a few years ago I was that burnout physician I think you were referring to. I was about 50 pounds overweight. I was just generally unhappy and unfulfilled. And the crazy thing is, it seems like I checked all the boxes in life. You know, it was like, okay, finish med school, be a doctor. My parents were immigrant nurses from the Philippines, so you know, that seed was planted.
And you started med school like you were 17 when you started med school, correct?
It was one of those Doogie Howser programs. That it was right out of high school, where it was I think there's 6 or 7 programs that it's a 6-year med school right out of high school combined with your undergrad. And so, you know, the medical training itself is already a crucible, but then you put a 17-year-old who is still not only trying to learn how to be a physician, but you're still just trying to be a human.
Yeah,
to be an adult.
I mean, was it, how much of that was like your parents driving you? Were you just driven naturally? Right.
I think it was a mixture of both. You know, of course, seeing my parents grow up, you know, they grew up in the Philippines, third world country, you know, and they kind of live the American dream. They found a way to get out of a third world country. They went to nursing school and they were recruited to the middle of America, Kansas City. And once they started their first job there were 30 of their classmates, and I was one of the first children born. So I was kind of raised by that village of Filipino immigrants that was like, oh, the physician is the top of the food chain.
Right.
Like you should be a physician. And so, and lo and behold, there was that accelerated med school program in high school. So I was kind of fast-tracked into that. And to be honest, the medical training program is one of the most strenuous things that I can look back now that I ever went through. Like, in a way, we are trained to take care of humans, but through the training, they expect us to be humanoid. They almost take away our humanity, meaning that they expect us to work, not take care of ourselves. Is really kind of how that's set up. They expect us to sleep less than most other 17-year-olds, study more. You know, the sense of community. We looked at our class of 100 people. The med school expected 25 of us not to not to be able to pass the test and make it to the next year. That's how it was set up. And so you would sit at the table of 4 of us, and my gosh, one of us may not be here.
Yeah.
And that was the nature of medicine. Medicine is like we're competing for a limited number of spots.
And you know that at the moment, too. I mean, that's the stress of being in that moment and that situation. And it's almost like, you know, that Navy SEAL, like, just who's going to get cut and who's meant. Because you have to learn all the knowledge, but I don't think a lot of people maybe understand the just mental, and it's purposeful, right? Like, they put that stress on you.
Right.
Do you think it's necessary that they do that?
Well, now, of course, on the other side, I would say, you know, going through it is just like you're just trying to get through it. It's that whole Navy SEAL mentality. It's just like try to get through every rotation, pass the test, almost at any cost. Whereas, like, well, that's where I got a lot of bad habits. That's where I didn't sleep well. That's where I started to eat a lot of junk food, because that's all that's open late at night.
Right.
Even our hospital where I trained, the only thing open after 7 p.m. was McDonald's.
Right.
That's it. And we're expected to work up to 36 to 48-hour shifts as a resident. As a student, there's no limitations. You can, you know, depending on how driven you are. And then because
it's crazy when you think about what the lack of sleep
and we know
does
this.
to people. Yes.
Yeah, we know this, and it's just now, and we never got, you know, sure, I went to med school, you know, got a lot of expensive degrees and letters after my name, but there was never like a school to teach me like life school.
Right.
Especially when it talks to now my big thing is trying to find balance in life and be like, okay, you can still do all those things, but you still have to take care of yourself. And that's even more topical now with COVID, because if we're not taking our own precautions and putting on our personal protective equipment, if I get sick and God forbid I can't work on the front lines, I know I work in a single coverage ER. I'm the only ER doc there. Places like that, they may have to close, or I can't take care of people at that point. And it's the same idea of like the oxygen mask in an airplane. If you're not putting your mask on, taking care of yourself, how can you help your loved one or your child or anything like that? And that's where I've, when we're talking about what was the turning point, I got, 3 to 4 years ago, was like, gosh, even though I had checked all these life benchmarks, something is still missing. Like in a way I was successful, but not fulfilled.
Okay.
And because of that, I really felt my own self-care was lacking. So I almost went back to my own kind of like life school and figured out that's where almost like the life coaching thing came up, because how can I fill that gap of my knowledge base with the life experience of I was a primary care doc before and kind of knew the limitations of the medical system, where the expectation a lot of times is, hey doc, try to fix me in 7 to 10 minutes with a prescription, or something that, I knew that it was going to take more than that. It's probably like, hey, well, how are you eating? How are you sleeping? How's stress? And it's just, that's not how, unfortunately, our traditional medical system isn't set up. And so,
did you meet somebody? Did you see something?
Man. I always look back
because you kind of now, I know, have taken things to an extreme, like you and I, and that's where you and I resonate, I think, a little bit on like the body hacking and all the, now the optimization. But, but it was really like almost like you just hit this point of like maybe, not a nervous breakdown, but like
I can say, trust me, I've had struggles in life where there's been definite ones where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a low pain. Just even getting through med school, it's like there's so much acute stress, kind of the ups and downs.
I don't see how anybody can work that hard. I just don't think it's realistic that anybody can work that hard to become the kind of doctor and work that hard and not at some point need to create some balance.
Correct.
It just seems almost humanly impossible.
And that's what I started
turn into a robot at that
And that's
point.
what I started to see. Like I started to see the burnout docs in the ER. That I was like, gosh, why is this doc still working 20 shifts a month? And you could just feel like the negative energy and the stress that they would, they're the yellers, the screamers that, they're just in a way that they were still kind of coping with things on the inside. And so if there was one thing that kind of sticks out to me, I remember there's a picture of me and my daughter was about 1 at the time. And I remember looking at the picture, I was like, gosh, is that how, I was like, gosh, I had a young family, kids were 1 and 3. And I just was kind of looking at myself, I was like, that's not how I pictured myself to be in the context of everything else. And kind of with that, instead of going to we have to go to CMEs or continuing medical education. And I was doing my 10-year board review course. And I remember it was in Seattle. And it's all these like pissed off docs that have to do the board review, which is one of the most, we have to try to remember every piece of minutia and get tested on it. Well, nowadays you can just ask Siri and find out most of this. But so we were at this board review course, and I remember looking around the room and just seeing not only myself but everyone else, just like how unhappy we were. And then at break time, half the group would go out and smoke. The other half, they didn't have healthy snacks out. It was all soda, mostly soda, and it's like, gosh, this is our healthcare system, and these are my colleagues. And that's when I made the shift from going, I still have to go to those to maintain my license, but I started going to more of the health and wellness conferences. I think that one of the first ones I went to was Dr. Mark Hyman's conference. He's a big functional medicine guy out of the Cleveland Clinic, and he's kind of made that pivot now into definitely health and wellness, but he's also family medicine trained, kind of had, similar but different, had his own kind of health journey. But now has, been inspirational and kind of going through his conference and making connections through him. That's how I ended up following kind of the biohacking community and then picking the coaching program I decided to go through. That kind of
pretty eye-opening how big that community. That's part of our community here and whatever. And I've become such a part of what this is about is that biohacking. It's pretty eye-opening how amazing, big it is, and how many different technologies it is. So, and you've gotten super into some of that stuff as well yourself. So, what are some of the things you do now? Maybe even talk about a little bit more then, because then you just start with diet and
so it's
exercise.
A mixture of things. I look at all of it. Everyone's going to have, like I have my core things I look at when I like to explain the balanced life kind of wellness wheel. And let's say I'm talking to even a friend, a colleague, or a client. Each person has those different kind of core spokes in their wheel. You kind of mentioned diet, which people will hear, oh, it's a whatever, they'll think the fad diet, like right now it's keto. But if you just kind of look at, that's definitely a spoke. If you don't, like the analogy of looking at a machine, if you don't fuel a machine, or if you put crap gas in it, it's going to run like crap.
Right.
So that's one key. Another one is, movement or exercise. So depending on how we're moving the body, and kind of shifting from just mindless movement. If you think about, looking at your standard gym, everyone just, zoning out, watching something on Netflix, on the tablet, just kind of like they're just rats on a treadmill.
Yeah.
Versus like, what do you want to do when you move? You want to be able to chase your kids, get down on the ground, stuff that makes more sense.
Right.
And so that's the focus of movement.
Well, and I think right now everybody's not at the gym. They're in front of their television set watching whatever
Netflix
online.
Well,
there's Netflix, but the people who at least are still exercising.
Oh, they do.
They're doing the
virtual.
Yeah, the virtual ones. I can't think of any of the names of the big people. Like
or the Peloton.
I know my wife just signed up for some $99 thing that she gets like the whole year, and she'll be doing workouts in front of the TV.
Yeah,
which is great, that technology, but
Yeah. So so the movement's a part. The self-care is probably one of my biggest things, because I was like, gosh, I never really took time to take care of myself. It was almost like, being a physician, you're trained to almost train that out of your system, which in a way that's kind of self-selective, because of course people that go into medicine want to take care of other people.
Right.
But one of the biggest lessons I've learned is like, gosh, I need to take care of myself.
Okay.
And then
meaning like mentally,
kind of all of it. Let it be physically, emotionally, spiritually, kind of whatever that may be. That's kind of one of those other hubs when I'm talking about a wellness wheel, because people can, just if you think about it, every now and then your tire needs to be, balanced and rotated.
Right.
And so it's like, gosh, what's lacking right now?
Right.
And that's just like every day in life, you're thinking that tire is moving, you have to react to different things. And so,
and it's almost like it's okay to be a little like selfish and be about you, because if you're not ever being about you. Yeah. It's interesting. Actually, I like what you're saying with that, because it's actually a really important thing. And especially I think people who are caretakers are always giving, and like they have this weird feeling about doing something for themselves. Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a major shift, I know, and I can just speak of myself, like making sure I dial in that self-care, which part of that is the food, part of that's sleep. Being an emergency room doc, I found myself working a lot of night shifts, just because that's going through med school. I was always kind of a night person and never prioritized sleep. But when I would see like how it would affect like the rest of my day, depending on how I slept, or even trying to find the magic pill in the box to be like, oh, I just need more Red Bull. That's how I found out about, caffeine drinks, was trying to study for a test. And it's like, there's different ways to prime the mind, prime the body to function the way it's supposed to. They're even being a doc for, over 15 years, there isn't a magic pill. There's nothing I'm going to write down on a prescription and some pharmacy company is going to package in a pill. Like there's adjuncts, but a lot of times you have to look in and you have to do that work. Yeah. And that's what I've learned too, is like, it's not, and I'm in an acute place, because in the ER, you're like, I can acutely fix stuff. Like I can put a shoulder back in place, or I can diagnose an MI, but it's like when it comes to the day-to-day, and that's why I'm loving to add this health and wellness component, is that's where I know I had to do the most work, and I feel like I can affect the most people that may be struggling with the main thing. Like one of the groups I'm really reaching out to are the stressed out med students, residents, or even the professionals that are like, gosh, I'm successful, but why am I not as happy or healthy as I could be? Yeah. And those are the people that I would like to reach. And then even on a larger sense, like with COVID going on, to being like, hey, there's this new push to be, I need to look at health and wellness, not just, hey, be reactive, to be like, okay, when I get diabetes or when I get high blood pressure, it's like this. And I think that's what we're going to see. There's already that population that I know me and you are familiar with, but I think that's going to grow, especially when they. Yeah. Well, a couple things with
with what you said too, which I think is, I think health and medicine is at its best, but it's in that very like reactive mode of healthcare. I mean, if
that's the American system is good at dealing with
if you're
acute
sick,
trauma,
you're not doing well, like that's where medicine thrives. It's its best. I mean, especially you think about what you guys do in the emergency room. You're in life or death situation, like that's that reactive mode. But being more proactive is kind of more health from the inside out, which is then looking at, your mindfulness, looking at what you're putting in your body, all these things that actually you can take control of. Right. I think it's so. I think there's such a need for what you're doing, especially in the medical community. Yeah. Because if you think about it as a society too, the healthier our medical providers are, you know, the healthier then they're going to be able to give to their patients and be role models.
Right.
And I think it's a big problem, actually, that the medical community is not like pillars of health in that way.
Right.
But I never really thought about how much on the mental side of things, just where, because I think most medical people that I've met who've been doing it for a while, I just always do get that sense of that, you know, they're not like miserable people or anything like that, but they're not that, and I felt that when I met you, is this like that passion and vigor for life, which really does tie into the communities now that you've got involved with.
Sure.
But I think to have somebody that they can turn to and be a role model is like awesome. So kudos for you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, because I can at least shed, you know, kind of pull the curtain back on that, because there is the traditional medical healthcare model. A lot of the docs get that energy you're feeling, almost that cynicism, because they went into it to really help people.
Yeah.
And when they get out there, they realize it's really about the bottom dollar. Like even like this, we focus on disease and illness. Like even if we want, honestly, people, like what creates dollars, and we're seeing that now because they've canceled all these non-emergent procedures. Like we need people in beds. We need almost chronic disease. Like if you look at how diabetes exploded, and you know how it is, like just even more our food pyramid, like how kind of upside down that whole thing was, and we've created these kind of first world problems of diabetes, obesity. A lot of healthcare workers, we can see through that. Like I got my MBA in healthcare leadership. I hated it. The more that I saw the back end of it, I was like, we're not treating people. We're treating them like, you know, cogs or commodities. Like we need these surgical centers. We need to cut on people. We need to put, you know, let's put pacemakers in their hearts and replace their joints, instead of being like, hey, how did you get to this point? Why are you 300 pounds? Versus let's just cut on them. You know, and so and that's just where that cynicism, I think, comes through. And I can tell, you know,
it's crazy because when I think about this, I always think at, you can see how somebody who's prone to conspiracy theories looks at it and says, because it's like such a recipe and the system just feeds itself. I mean, and I will tell you, I'm not a conspiracy theory person, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
And it's so backwards.
That's what it is.
And it's almost like, how do you change that?
Yeah, and we focus on the disease and illness, you know, and a lot of that is like, well, there's big money in pharmaceuticals. And, you know, and that's the farce that I see. Is like, gosh, why are we as the U.S. society paying this much for medicine that the same factory makes that the rest of the world doesn't pay that much for? So it's like it is like, I can see how there can be that, is this a conspiracy, or is it just is what it is? And now it's like there's a shift from that disease and illness to like, gosh, we need to be healthy and well, even if the system isn't supporting it.
So here's what I think, which is there's the political side of how do you change all this, which is not what I want to talk about.
Sure.
But then there's the like, what can I do side of that, right? And when it comes down to me, that's what I think about. And this is what I try to promote to my clients, my patients, which is what can you do about this for yourself? And what do you think people as individuals can be doing about this to change this?
And I've been having this conversation. I actually had it with my sister the other day, and it's exactly what you're talking about. I like to explain it like there's this circle of control, which of course is a lot smaller. We're talking about, hey, what am I going to do in the day-to-day?
Right.
And right now, everyone always has this circle of concern. And the circle of concern is here with COVID is like, holy crap, you can go down this scary rabbit hole of like, gosh, look what's happening here or there. And you can, all your anxiety kind of ramps up. But it's like, that's not going to fix what I can do right now. Like what we can do, each person can do right now is like take care of themselves. Eat as well as you can, you know, mentally. Like when it's time to take that break, you know, like, gosh, I can't change what's happening in New York City. Like for me, even as a doc, like, oh crap, docs may have died there. I'm a doc. I don't want to die. But I'm like, well, I can't change that fact. I can change the fact that when I go to work, like I know what precautions we need to do. I know what our resources are, and I know how we're going to react to a changing situation, volatile situation. And that's that circle of control, and that's what
it's like your Dr. Robot mode. You just went into it. Yeah, it's like, this is what I do.
But that's where, for everyone out there, like don't freak yourself out. Like really take care of yourself. Like look, and when you're, unfortunately, it's easy for us to just, it's so convenient as a phone. You can just scroll through and get lost in all that, and it can drive you nuts. Like I was my other shift, I saw people, almost on the hour, every hour that were just really just nervous. They're scared. They didn't know what to do. And they ended up just driving to the ER, which, they could have got exposed to stuff that they couldn't, they shouldn't have, or, and I'm not there to judge them once they get there, but at least help advise them to be like, hey, I'm here to help put your mind at ease. But then the greater kind of message here is like, we need to focus on ourselves to really get through this, and then even reach out further than we did before to our community, to our loved ones. That's why I was so happy when we kind of reconnected last week to be like, hey, I've been receiving kind of outpouring from different people, but just kind of to reconnect with you was great to be like, hey, I know you're on the same page here. How can we share this message? Like even sitting down with you now with this to be like, hey, let's get this out there because this is good stuff, because I know it's one of those, because the news, they're going to self-select all the sensational stuff that's going to drive clicks. Yeah. But there's a lot of good stuff that's happening right now. Even people staying home, they have to spend more time with their kids. They have to sit, like I had to sit down with my son with his homework yesterday, and it's like, gosh, when have I sat down for 3 hours? And like part of me I was almost like triggered, like, oh, this is just like grade school again. Why am I doing this? But it was, it's good. Like those are good problems to have. I know. And the silver lining. It's different. Gives us that opportunity.
It's different. I mean, it's different in my house, and we've had those moments where we're sitting down. Like, how are they teaching you this in school? Like, math is so different now.
Oh, so, I don't want to get into math. There's all these different things. Like, why are you guys
That's
doing
more
this?
anxiety maybe than COVID is right now. Like really great. How is it going with the coaching with people? How do people...
Yeah, so it's really been a lot of, especially right now, there was a push. Actually, April 1st was when I had slated to really kind of enroll my first kind of class and then kind of see how that went. But kind of everything else started happening where I'm finding myself being more of a kind of like a voice on through now virtual medium. Like let it be, let's put something on, like sitting on a podcast or an expert panel to be like, hey, how is life on the front lines? Because I was doing that for my family members and loved ones anyway. They're like, hey, I hope Gary's okay. This is scary. Look what happened to these ER docs. And I think using that kind of medium now, and I think we're all having to find that is to react to the current situation is all I can do is be like, well, this is what I'm going through, and if I can help other people, then that'll help kind of feed into what I see my coaching, or even what I like to call kind of that health and wellness community that we kind of alluded to earlier, to be like, hey, where is my like-minded tribe? In a way, even though we're social distancing, we can still find that virtually to be like, oh, that was cool. Or these people, joined, my Facebook group or reached out to be like, hey, when are you going to put out more, more information out there? And that's how I see it kind of going from here.
Because you've built some of these communities. I've seen one of them, like, what are these like one-wheel things that you're driving around with and all the time?
So the one wheel is it's an electric skateboard that it's one of those that has been kind of figuratively and literally in my life help provide balance, like it, because you have to balance to be able to be on it. But then like after a busy shift, it allows me to just shift into a different mind space, to kind of let go of almost getting into a flow state. And because of that, I've met a lot of cool people, just like through our Facebook group. It's a lot of dads that'll be like, okay, before COVID, we used to have a lot of group rides at least once or twice a week, and it'd be 15 to 30 people just kind of meeting up. And that's that sense of community, whatever you're into. Like it doesn't have to be a one wheel. Like right now, I'm passionate about the one wheel, but I've also partnered
up with... Are people like Zoom calling with that now on the communities or anything like that?
Not actually. I was just talking to the main moderator, and he's like, maybe we'll have a Zoom ride where we all just be like, hey, where are you guys riding at? And just turn on your camera, which that's the new world right now. That's how I'm doing a lot of...
I think that's like the one stock that's gone up since.
Well, I know, it's probably Zoom or, Doxy came up with.
All these... So it's, and you open this electric bike shop. Does that tie into the one wheels?
Yeah, it does, because we're going to offer kind of help introduce people to one wheels. Of course, the electric bike, everyone's more familiar with a bike. And then, of course, an electric version is kind of, help propel you for people, so it expands kind of what you can do.
How hard are those things actually to ride? Like
I've honestly
watched
rides
them. It looks
just
so
like
cool when you're doing them.
Oh, the one wheel?
Yeah, and you go on all these terrains. And
most people, less than, give me about 10 to 15 minutes with somebody, they can at least get on it and be able to get on and off. But like anything, there's a learning curve. I really kind of relate it to how long people that have gone through like snowboarding and they've tried to learn it themselves versus go through a lesson. And there's a learning curve where if you do fall, you don't understand, especially that's a piece of technology, you don't understand how it works. You can hurt yourself. And so, but it's just like anything else. Like if it's in your wheelhouse, like some people just jump right on it because they've been on skateboards or board sports or surfed. But there's a lot of people who haven't that have picked it up and then have found that it's a great way to kind of get around depending on what you want to do.
And it's got to incorporate like tons of balance and proprioception. I mean, how much of a workout is it?
Initially, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's just like anything. When you're tense, you're tensing everything up to try to not fall or get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And then as soon as that learning
this is
curve
good for
gets
me
better,
because I want to know I can exercise while I'm
yeah,
doing this too.
or
You're
even
not
if you
just
start, you've probably done it too. Have you ever been on like those balance boards or whenever you step
Right.
on like, I know you do it in your office, like just
Yeah.
those like an uneven
vibration.
surface.
Yeah.
Because then all your
Boku ball,
proprioceptors or your Bosu balls, they're all firing up.
Right.
So it's the same type of thing. So even if
So
you're
it's an
doing
electronic device, but you have to
yeah, it's
use
just
your
like
body.
a Segway. People are more familiar with a Segway, so it's the same type of technology where it's a self-balancing board, and then you turn it just by leaning, and then it's a toe side and heel side turn.
Okay.
But you can, like I use it just like sometimes even if I'm just like in the backyard with the kids, it's balancing on it. You do a squat on it. It's just like doing a squat on an uneven surface. So then you're not only squatting your body weight, but you're firing up all those proprioceptors and stuff that's more functional. And so that's where it kind of fills a big void there, because it's the group rides, but now I can walk the dogs, I can go chase the kids around the playground, I can,
And now you're managing a bike shop, or?
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed biking, and so and this was part of my plan about a couple of years ago. I was like, gosh, how can I become more balanced in my own life, where I just don't want to be Dr. Rosas. I was like, there's more to me than that. And it was like, well, I knew the ER was kind of burning me out. I was overstressed. I knew I wanted to cut that back, but knew I wanted to do something else with my time. And then I knew with the health and wellness coaching, I have this bigger plan to do not only one-on-one coaching, but doing, even events or retreats, and then even incorporating like the outdoor component, where it would be like, hey, let's take the fourth year med students, take a group that are interested to be like, hey, this is what I didn't learn in med school. Like this was the life school part of it.
Right.
And being like going through like a little curriculum to be like, hey, you have to get your finances, straight. I know a lot of it, if you're in a relationship, a lot of it is you're focused on just getting through schooling, but once you get through, you're gonna have to balance whatever personal relationship you have. If you wanna be a parent, that's gonna be another hat that they don't teach you how to be a doc with with kids. That's just stuff you have to learn on your own. If you don't have a good mentor or a preceptor, because a lot of times you'll go to these rotation, and a lot of times, like unfortunately, like 9 out of 10 times, the doc was struggling with their own work-life balance. Right. Like they were working late hours. They saw they didn't see their wife as much as they would want to. A nanny was raising their kids, and that was a saying that I like to sit on is like your mess becomes your message. Mm-hmm. And I can look at like my whole journey to be like, I know there are people that have, sat in my shoes before or living through it. And even what I go through day to day with what's going on, just to find balance in your life is so key. Because if you become so involved in doing just one thing, let it be your career or life or, and that's part of life. We're going to get them balance. Like COVID came in through and pushed everyone off whatever they were on, their bike, their skateboard, their one wheel. And it's like, you better figure something else out, because this is a new world we're having to navigate. And so that's where I so the bike shop, that's kind of figuratively, I was like, gosh, that would be a fun thing. And now it's going to be kind of the footprint of my health and wellness community, where I'm going to start doing when COVID passes, like let's do like a bike with the doc, hike with the doc, or coffee with the doc in the morning before the bike shop opens, and then just kind of create that community and spread that message is where I see that going. So I know it's kind of out there, be like, oh, so you do this and that, but that's kind of the ER doc kind of does to do different things.
I love it. It's so cool. Definitely balanced and definitely versatile. Yeah. And then you're going to be opening this optimization center. What's it called?
It's the balance. It's going to be the Balanced Life Studios.
Yes.
So that's going to be
Human Optimization Center. I like human optimization.
Yeah. So that's going to be the physical plant of that health and wellness community, where you're going to have different parts. Like I have this vision of having, it's going to be a part like a teaching kitchen or classroom. That way, nowadays not everyone's going out, so they're getting used to having to cook at home and eating real food. Like one of the big tenets is, real food is medicine. Like getting away from processed food, which is the standard American diet. The SAD diet is kind of what we call it. And so it's going to have a place like that. It's going to have like a community space to do, group fitness or some didactic or lecture training. It's going to have pieces of that biohacking equipment that we've kind of talked about. Like I know we mentioned we met an exercise coach that uses basically an AI or computer-driven piece of machinery to maximize results in minimal time, which for busy people, when that was kind of where society was going, we needed that. Now that we have more time.
It was great. Free plug to them, man. These 20-minute workouts, and you're in and out, and I mean, and it's a great
good workout,
and it's measuring the whole,
the measurables,
everything
and stuff.
all the way. So it's biofeedback, and you see some really cool results. What other biohacking stuff are you doing? What are you looking to put in there?
Yeah, so the main things, we were just talking about the movement pieces, which would be kind of a like the cardiovascular version of that, which would be to, instead of doing like a 45-minute HIIT workout, you can do that in a shorter period of time. The exercise coach, which is basically exercising against a computer to make sure that you're maximizing your time there.
Right.
So that's the physical side or the movement. From the health, more of the self-care is you want to be able to recover well. So there's the ideas of an infrared sauna would be one. Right. A cold tub would be something to add on. And I've been looking at just like different modalities there, and kind of what I go with is stuff that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it right now is focusing on that movement and then even that recovery piece. Meditation and neurobiofeedback is something that I've started, took in my own journey down to be like, hey, you don't need a medicine to fix your anxiety and depression. There's
so
other
ways. What have you been doing there? Like what? So
I'm a big fan right now of the meditation apps.
Okay.
There's kind of the deeper ones. One that I'll probably bring in is something that Tony Robbins does. He has a company spinoff called NewCalm.
Yep.
And so they kind of do, it's kind of another piece of biohacking where they use different electrodes and bring in the technology to see if you can get, the rest and recovery.
Right.
And so there'd be what we call like the recovery part of the studio, where it'd be like kind of more of that Zen-like meditation, kind of get your mindset right type stuff. So so all those pieces will be there, and I see that as being a very kind of organic deal, especially being a brick and mortar, to see how that community grows, to be like, hey, we're going to start with this equipment. Like right now it's through the bike shop. We've added that exercise bike in there. And then the next plan is to do a lot of right now it's going to be kind of a virtual kind of coaching and learning center. And then when COVID passes, kind of more of a community where we can come together, like a morning motivator or different things where we can focus on what people need to find balance in their life. They're like, it may be like, oh, what is this new keto craze, or what is the carnivore diet, or different things where it'd be like,
what do you do? I'm just interested, like,
it's a mixture.
What do you do like right now? And
so I'm not, and that's the thing. Even my whole idea, I'm not going to sit here and say there's a one size fits all, but one size fits me right now. It's a mixture of getting away from the processed food, basically eating more real food, and then right now I love the. Instead of intermittent fasting, it's more that window, and I know that kind of goes with the longevity of going back to, and you can give it different terms.
Get rid of senolytic cells and all.
Like it has like that paleo base, or that I love ancestral health, because we just treat the body how it's supposed to be treated. Yeah, we weren't supposed to eat Twinkies and ho-hos.
Really keep it simple
McDonald's.
For most people. It's just eat more real food,
eat more real
less food,
mostly plants. And that's usually will get you through it. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
But I like messing around with, what's this new stuff? What's this new brain octane oil? Right. Or what's the new the MCT oils are hot right now. Right. So I like dabbling with all those, and that's where.
And how do you measure some of these things?
So I usually like to be like, well, let me try it and then see how I feel. That's how I do my own type of thing.
Are you going mostly how you feel? Do you do like blood work a lot? How much are you incorporating things like wearables?
Yeah, I'll look at that. Honestly, it's more on like, well, how, the measurables I use right now are mostly like, how am I feeling? Because I know working in the ER, I'm put under a stressful environment where I'm like, gosh, I have more energy tonight. Is that, I try to figure out what it is, try to work myself backward and be like, oh, what did I eat? What didn't I eat? Or what did I eat that may have been, the kryptonite food that made me feel this way? Right. Or is it a mindset thing? Right. Is it because I've been stressed out about COVID and found myself not sleeping because I was reading every single piece of, study or news that I could find out that I think would be helpful? It's
amazing just how much you can start to learn and change just by tuning into yourself. Yep. I mean, and that's, I love, I don't hear that enough from people. And when I hear my clients start talking about just how they feel and whatever, it's like really profound change you can move. People are so disconnected from who they are.
Well, I love that, because whenever I've incorporated this into when I see patients in the ER, we'll do our standard, what's your chief complaint, your history of present illness, and then I love just saying, so what do you think it is?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I get the greatest insight. I'm like, this is
Right.
what I think is, I haven't lived in that body. A lot of these people I just
Yeah.
met, like you've lived in that body. Like you, Steve Hruby, know.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I think 10 years ago I had something similar and this
Right.
is what happened. And it's the insight I've gained of that, you know, especially being an ER doc, a lot of it is like, I got to go in and fix this as fast
Right.
as possible.
Right.
But I've noticed when I've just sat and just like, well, let me just ask a question as simple as like, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
And I
And
love
what
it.
a pattern interrupt for that client at that moment too. Like, it's like
Because they're getting
doctor's asking,
bombarded,
like,
yeah.
yes.
And we're squeezing stuff on them, we're
Yes.
poking them with stuff,
Yes.
putting putting all these
Yeah,
things
yeah.
on, and then it's like, well, what do you
I'm sure
think?
that actually profoundly changes things.
Yeah,
Right,
no,
right
it's
in
been
that.
it's been great.
Yeah.
It's been you know, if that's one of the things that I could pass on to medical professionals, or you know,
Right.
just be like, hey, just ask them what they think.
Yeah.
And then it's been profound.
I love it. I love it. I gotta ask you talked about it earlier because you were talking about your crazy sleep schedules. Sleep is something I work so hard on, but how do you, like, what do you do to balance that, since you do have night shift working and things like that, and that is very disruptive to
absolutely.
you know, our natural rhythms.
Circadian rhythms.
So what do you do to combat that?
Yeah. The key is when I know I'm going into a shift is like I try to listen to my body. Like if it feels like it needs to sleep before a shift, or I feel like I can, I've gotten really good at honing in, trying to get that power nap.
Right.
You know, I'm trying to look at all the data about that, the best way to get that. Sleep hygiene's a big part. You know, of course, you know, staying off the screens, like even the whole idea of this, you know, light pollution is kind of something that I've been experimenting with,
right?
Because when you're exposed to a lot of
this is coming from a medical doctor, this is all real stuff, because this is
Yeah.
like real science on this stuff too.
Oh yeah, and that's where I'm the perfect test client, because I have to sit under artificial light
right
when you're not supposed to be under light, and that they've shown that affects melatonin production, so all that gets thrown off, and so I kind of just do when I do work nights is I really try to do the best I can during that day. Like I know if it's a super busy night and I'm running around, like I'll know I'll need to sleep as soon as possible if I can. A lot of the times I know I'll be up running around just because of commuting and then wanting to see the kids, where it'll be sometimes closer to like 10, 11, or even noon if I'll lay down. And then if I'm working again that night, I really have to try to sleep a couple hours before I go back.
Yeah.
And so it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Steve, you know, it's one of those things I
Yeah.
know, and that's why I want to work less nights
Right.
in general, and that's where even my own personal shift from being like, gosh, I can't do that many shifts, but if I do, what can I do on those times I'm not there to maximize sleep? But a lot of that is trying to
do
even
most
time
healthcare providers just Red Bullet, coffee, like
a lot of times, you know, if you look at what healthcare providers, that's why they sell those 2-for-1 energy drinks at the gas station. It's part healthcare workers, part other parts of society, but that's
I've seen many people in scrubs buying those.
That's you know, and that's the crazy thing is a lot of that's marketing, you know, and I used to be a big believer in those, or just I guess a consumer. Just because it's convenient, or that what was there at, you know, at the hospital, you know, gift shop.
And it is that short term. I mean, you do.
You can get that little, you know, kind of bump from the caffeine, but then it's like, you know, there's other ways to kind of look at, you know, being able to get that, and so you know, I'm kind of open to kind of, you know, different things and kind of see, and so it's tough, and I've been prescribed all the different things for night shift disorder, like the sleeping aids, like the Ambien, and even the modafinil for the shift workers, like some of the stimulants. And what I found is those can all be things that maybe have a place, but they're not going to fix things for you. Yeah. Like you can't survive in that. The human body wasn't say, here's a tree that, you know, or this is what you're supposed to be doing to do something unnatural. They're all kind of adjuncts to give you, you know, space when you need it, and you really have to work on dialing in that other stuff. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time being here. No, thank you. We definitely will be in contact, because I just want to hear how it goes the next few weeks. Sure. So appreciate you. Okay. We'll have you on again. We'll have to we'll do the COVID virtual bump.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Steve.